We continue now at the top of Daf Bezom and Bezom Meseches Chagigah. This is Chagigah Daf Tube. Beis Shammai respond to Beis Hillel when it comes to an individual who's half Eved, half Ben Chorin. So he says, if you have the person work for the master on alternate days, so Tikantam es Rabo, you've fixed the situation in terms of Ve'as Atzmo lo Tikantam, but you haven't fixed the individual himself. What are we going to do with this individual who's a half Eved, half free? Lisa Shifcha Eino Yachol, he can't marry a Shifcha because he's half free. And Bas Chorin Eino Yachol, he can't marry a free woman because he's half slave. Livatel, so what should he do? Not marry anyone. But the whole world was created only for the purpose of Pru Revu, being fruitful and multiplying. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Lo so bara l'sheves yitzara. The world wasn't created to be empty. The world was created to be settled. So rather say Beis Shammai, in order to fix the world, Kofen es Rabba, we force the master of the oso ben Chorin, and we force the master to make this individual fully free. V'chosiv lo shtar al chatzi domav. And he writes a shtar, he writes a document for half of his value when he fully frees this particular slave. V'chazru Beis Hillel lahoros kedivrei Beis Shammai. And Beis Hillel ended up retracting, and they retracted to the position of Beis Shammai. So it emerges, according to this Mishnah Achrona, that everybody agrees that when it comes to an individual who's half slave, half free, he's actually considered to be fully free. Because really we're going to force the master to free him anyway, and therefore he would be chayiv in aliyah l'regel. The Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, chutz mecheres shota v'katan v'chulu. It said, with the exception of a cheres shota v'katan, that's again a deaf mute, an imbecile, and a minor, they're not chayiv in aliyah l'regel. And the Gemara says, Katani cheresh dumya de shota v'katan. It says over here in the Mishnah cheresh, and we have to compare that case to a shota v'katan. Ma shota v'katan de lav b'nei deya. Obviously, by shota katan, we're talking about individuals who do not have das. So av cheresh de lav bar deya, who obviously also the cheresh, when we're talking about the individual who's deaf, it must be a kind of deaf person who's considered not to have das. The Kamash Malon Kiritanan, and it must be teaching us, like the Mishnah says, Cheresh Shedibru Chachamim B'chol Makom, when the Chachamim talk about a Cheresh everywhere, so She'eno Shomeya Ve'eno Medaber, it has to be an individual who not only cannot hear, because the literal translation of Cheresh is somebody who's deaf who can't hear, but it must be a deaf mute, somebody who can't hear and he can't speak, already lacking the ability of speaking, is considered to be lacking das. Hamidaber ve'eno shomeya, but if a person can speak but he can't hear, or shomeya ve'eno medaber, but let's say he can hear but he can't speak, so chayiv, in those cases, he'd actually be chayiv in aliyah l'regel, because that individual is considered to have das. And the Gemara says, Tanina Laha, the Tanur, our Mishnah follows the same thing that we learned in the following Brisa. It says in the Brisa, Hamidaber ve'eno shomeya, somebody who speaks but cannot hear, zehu cheresh, that's called a cheresh, that's called somebody who's deaf. Shomeya ve'eno medaber, somebody who can hear but cannot speak. Zehu ilaim, that's called an ilaim, that's somebody who's mute. And zeh v'zeh harein kepichin l'chol divreim. Both of these cases, if you can hear or if you can speak, you're considered like a regular individual in terms of das. You don't have any of the exemptions from mitzvahs that people without das have. And the Gemara says, Umimayid medaber ve'eno shomeya zehu cheresh. Now, how do we know that somebody who speaks and cannot hear is really called a cheresh, and shomeya ve'eno medaber zehu ilaim, and that somebody who hears but cannot speak is called an ilaim, is called a mute? That we learn from the pasuk. The pasuk says, the pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Tehillim, v'ani kecheresh lo eshma, says beferish, I'm like a deaf person who cannot hear, u'che'ilam lo yiftach piv, like an ilaim who can't open his mouth, like a mute. V'boyasema, and if you want, I could say another explanation. Keda amri inshi, it's like people say, ishtakil milule, his words have been taken. That's like the word ilaim. Milule, his words have been taken, meaning he is a mute. And we'll take a look at a few Rashis over here. Kedetanan bereish Meseches Trumos. It says at the beginning of Meseches Trumos, cheresh adibru bo chachamim b'chol makom shehishvu oso l'shota. What we mean to say is, whenever it says cheresh in the same line as a shota, puts it together in halacha with a shota, lepotro, to say you're potter just like a shota, lo dibro ella b'misheino shomei v'ena medaber. Then, in that context, the word cheresh means a deaf mute. This is something that Chachamim established. Somebody who cannot hear and cannot speak is considered like he doesn't have das. But if he can speak and not hear, in other words, the case over here was, originally he was a pikeach, he was able to hear, and that way he was able to learn how to speak. He became deaf later in life. That's an example of somebody who can speak but cannot hear, is usually somebody who became deaf later in life, so they had learned to speak while they were able to hear. Tanina b'masnisin lahad tanu rabbanan. The Gemara then said that our Mishnah follows the following Brisa or Tosefta. Rashi says, B'Brisa, it says in the Brisa, the same thing as our Mishnah. The point, says Rashi, is we understand from this that this Brisa is something that we should take seriously. We can rely upon this Brisa because our Mishnah is the same as the Brisa. And Rashi continues, Zev ezek kepikchim, again, someone who can hear or someone who can speak is considered a pikeach, considered someone who has das. Hainu kemas nisan, that's like our Mishnah. The lo pater al cheresh hadom l'shota. Our Mishnah says only a cheresh that's similar to a shota is pater from aliyah l'regel. V'ba'isem, if you want, I could say ilaim kemashmo. The word ilaim, why does it mean a mute? Because it's what it sounds like. No trikon ishtakel milule. It sounds like it means to say the words were taken. Nital diburo, his speech was taken. That's what an ilaim is. The Gemara continues at the two dots. We said previously, medaber ve'eno shomeya, shomeya ve'eno medaber chayev. Somebody who could speak and can hear, somebody who can hear and cannot speak is chayev in this mitzvah. V'atanya, so the Gemara says, but we learned in a brisa, medaber ve'eno shomeya, shomeya ve'eno medaber pater. It says the exact opposite. If a person can speak and cannot hear, a person can hear and cannot speak, he's actually pater. So what's going on? So the Gemara says, Amar Ravina v'itema Rava. So Ravina says, and some people have a version that it's Rava that says, the following is the answer, Chisure mechzer v'hachi katani. There are words missing, and so you have to learn it as follows. Hakol chayovin b're'iyah v'simcha. Everybody is chayiv in the mitzvah of re'iyah, in the mitzvah of simcha. Chutz mecheresh hamedaber ve'eno shomeya. Except for a cheresh who can speak but cannot hear. And shomeya ve'eno medaber, or somebody who can hear but cannot speak. Shepater min har'iyah, that individual is pater from re'iyah. V'yava bi shepater min har'iyah, and even though that individual is pater from re'iyah, from going up to the Beis HaMikdash on the regel, chayiv b'simcha, that individual is still chayiv in the mitzvah of simcha. That's she'eno lo shomeya v'lo medaber. Now somebody who cannot hear and cannot speak, v'shota v'katan, or somebody, let's say, who's an imbecile, or somebody who's a minor, pater af min ha-simcha, that individual is pater even from the mitzvah of simcha. Hoel upturim mikol mitzvahs, ho amuros b'torah, since they're already pater from all mitzvahs that are said in the Torah. And Rashi over here explains, pater min ha-re'iyah is pater from re'iyah, kashin ha'adadi masnisinu brisa. We have a contradiction here between the Mishnah and the brisa. Somebody who can hear and cannot speak, or can speak and cannot hear, is he chayiv in re'iyah or not? And so the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Masnisin Datani Eitzel Re'iyah Cheresh Dumya Deshota. Rava explains, our Mishnah, which talks about Cheresh the same as a Shota, meaning we're talking about somebody without Das, Chisure Mechzer of Hachi Katani, there are words missing, and it should read as follows. Diava bidalo dome l'shota pater. Even though he's not similar to a shota, really he is pater. V'chitanya masnisin dumya deshota gabe simcha hudetani. When our Mishnah says a cheresh is only pater if he's like a shota, that's talking about the mitzvah of simcha on yontif. Utrei minei cheresh tana masnisin. And you have to understand our Mishnah that it's talking about two different kinds of cheresh, two different kinds of deaf individuals. V'chisure mechzer masnisin. And the Mishnah is missing words. V'hachi katani, you should read it as follows. Hakol chayovin b're'iyah, everyone's chayav in re'iyah, chutz me cheresh koldu, except for a cheresh, any kind of cheresh. O shomeya ve'eno medaber, o medaber ve'eno shomeya. Whether he can hear and can't speak, whether he can speak and cannot hear, they're all going to be pater from re'iyah. V'afal pishu pater ba'olas re'iyah leiros, even though this individual is pater from the olas re'iyah, from going up to the Beis HaMikdash on the regel, but still they're going to be, even though they're pater from that, they're still going to be chayiv in simcha because they have das. The Gemara continues, Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa that supports this idea as well. The brisa says, Hakol chayavin b're'iyah uvesimcha, everybody's chayiv in olas re'iyah and in the mitzvah of simcha and yontiv, chutz mecheresh hamedaber ve'eno shomeya, shomeya ve'eno medaber, except for a cheresh who can speak and cannot hear, or can hear and cannot speak, shepetur min har'iyah, that they are pater from re'iyah, v'afal pi shepater min har'iyah, and even though they're pater from re'iyah, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph.